China sees Taiwan as a breakaway province that will eventually be under Beijing's control again. However, the self-ruled island sees itself as distinct from the mainland, with its own constitution and democratically elected leaders. Let's first understand the history of China versus Taiwan clash. Historical sources suggest that the island first came under full Chinese control in the 17th century when the Qing dynasty began administering it. Then, in 1895, they gave up the island to Japan after losing the First Sino-Japanese War. It was the fall of the Qing dynasty and the end of the 2,000 years of imperial rule in the year 1912 that led to a relentless struggle for control of the People's Republic of China between the Nanjing-based ROC nationalist government and the Chinese Communist Party. China took the island again in 1945 after Japan lost World War II. But a civil war erupted in mainland China between nationalist government forces led by Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong's Communist Party. Thereafter began a relentless struggle for control of the People's Republic of China between the Nanjing-based ROC nationalist government and the Chinese Communist Party before the nationalist government was overthrown in 1949. Chiang Kai-shek and what was left of the Nationalist Party, known as the Kuomintang, fled to Taiwan, where they ruled for the next several decades. They made Taipei its new capital. This group, referred to as mainland Chinese, dominated Taiwan's politics for many years, though they only account for 14% of the population. Chiang established a government in exile in Taiwan, which he led for the next 25 years. There is disagreement and confusion about what Taiwan is. Chiang's republic government in exile at first claimed to represent the whole of China, which it intended to reoccupy. It held China's seat on the United Nations Security Council and was recognized by many Western nations as the only Chinese government. By the 1970s, some countries began to argue that the Taipei government could no longer be considered a genuine representative of the hundreds of millions of people living in mainland China. Then, in 1971, the UN switched diplomatic recognition to Beijing and the ROC government was forced out. In 1978, China also began opening up its economy. Recognizing opportunities for trade and the need to develop relations, the U.S. formally established diplomatic ties with Beijing in 1979. Since then, the number of countries that recognize the ROC government diplomatically has fallen significantly to about 15. Now, despite having all the characteristic of an independent state and a political system that is distinct from China, Taiwan's legal status remains unclear. China points to this history to say that Taiwan was originally a Chinese province, but the Taiwanese point to the same history to argue that they were never part of the modern Chinese state that was first formed after the revolution in 1911, or the People's Republic of China that was established under Mao in 1949. It has its own constitution, democratically elected leaders, and about 300,000 active troops in its armed forces. The Kuomintang has been one of Taiwan's most prominent political parties ever since, ruling the island for a significant part of its history. China exerts considerable diplomatic pressure on other countries not to recognize Taiwan or to do anything which implies recognition. Relations started improving in the 1980s as Taiwan relaxed rules on visits to and investments in China. In 1991, it proclaimed that the war with the People's Republic of China was over. China proposed the so-called one country, two systems option, which it said would allow Taiwan significant autonomy if it agreed to come under Beijing's control. Taiwan rejected the offer, and Beijing insisted that Taiwan's ROC government is illegitimate, but unofficial representatives from China and Taiwan still held limited talks. President Lee Teng-hui, known as Taiwan's father of democracy, led constitutional changes towards, which eventually made for the election of the island's first non-KMT president, Chen Shui-bian, in 2000, much to Beijing's disagreement. Mr. Chen and his party, the Democratic Progressive Party, had openly backed independence. A year after Mr. Chen was re-elected in 2004, China passed a so-called anti-secession law stating China's right to use non-peaceful means against Taiwan if it tried to secede from China. Mr. Chen was succeeded by the KMT's Ma Ying-jeou in 2008, who tried improving relations through economic agreements. 8 years later, in 2016, Taiwan's current president, Tsai Ing-wen, who now leads the independence-leaning Democratic Progressive Party, was elected. America's long-standing policy has been one of strategic ambiguity to the extent that it would intervene militarily if China were to invade Taiwan. Officially, it sticks to the One China policy, which recognizes only one Chinese government in Beijing and has formal ties with Beijing rather than Taipei. The U.S. approach is governed by the Taiwan Relations Act, passed by the U.S. Congress in 1979, and the recently declassified Six Assurances, which President Ronald Reagan conveyed to Taiwan in 1982. But it has also pledged to supply Taiwan with defensive weapons and stressed that any attack by China would cause grave concern. China has employed a variety of coercive tactics short of armed conflict, and it has ramped up these measures since Tsai's election in 2016. Taiwan has reported that thousands of cyber attacks from China target its government agencies every day. Relations between Taiwan and China appear to have deteriorated sharply following Ms. Pelosi's visit, which Beijing condemned as extremely dangerous. The latest proposed legislation, the Taiwan Policy Act of 2022, includes designating Taiwan as a major non-North Atlantic Treaty Organization ally. In August 2022, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi became the first speaker to do so since Newt Gingrich in 1997 and met with Tsai. Beijing strongly condemned the visit and in response planned military exercises that effectively surround the island and banned imports of some fruit and fish from Taiwan, among other actions. Its objective is to wear down Taiwan and prompt the island's people to conclude that their best option is unification with the mainland. To that end, China has increased the frequency and scale of patrols of PLA bombers, fighter jets, and surveillance aircraft over and around Taiwan. It has also increasingly sailed its warships and aircraft carriers through the Taiwan Strait in shows of force. There's a growing concern about Chinese assertiveness and the deterioration in cross-strait relations which could spark a conflict. Such a conflict has the potential to lead to a U.S.-China confrontation. That's because China hasn't ruled out using force to achieve Taiwan's reunification, and the United States hasn't ruled out defending Taiwan if China attacks. However, experts rule out such a possibility in the near future. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Leave a like if you want to see more of these videos. It really helps the channel. But for now, I hope to see you again soon.